When I saw the photos, I didn't scream. I just stopped breathing. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always come with thunder or broken glass. Sometimes it comes with silence, a kind so thick that even your own heartbeat sounds wrong. That's what happened to me that ordinary Thursday night, when I thought I was just scrolling through my daughter's phone to find a picture from her school debate. But before I take you there, to that moment where everything inside me shattered, I need to tell you what life looked like before the cracks appeared. My name is Sarah. I'm 45. And for the most part, I believed I had survived the hardest parts of life already. My first marriage ended when I was 34. My husband, Amir, walked out after falling in love with someone younger. Back then, my daughter Hira was just 9 years old, too young to understand why her father stopped showing up for her birthdays. I promised myself I'd never let her feel unwanted again. The years after that were quiet but heavy. I worked at a small school as an administrative assistant, managed bills, and tried to fill our little home with warmth. Hira grew into a smart, moody teenager, the kind who rolled her eyes but still hugged me when no one was watching. When Rizwan entered our lives, it felt like sunlight after years of rain. He was kind, calm in a way that made people trust him instantly. He used to teach part-time at the same school where I worked, always helping with the computer systems or carrying boxes without being asked. He was 8 years younger than me, something that made the women in the staff room whisper. But I didn't care. For the first time, I felt seen again. It wasn't love at first sight. It was slower, a friendship that grew roots. He'd bring me tea during lunch breaks and ask about Hira's exams. I liked that he never tried to replace her father. Instead, he'd listen when she talked, even about things I didn't understand. Her favorite bands, her sketches, her small rebellions. When we married 2 years later, I thought I'd finally built a family again. Our wedding was simple, a quiet ceremony, a few close friends, and a promise I thought we'd all keep: to love, to respect, to protect each other. For a while, everything was fine. Rizwan made the house feel alive again. He'd fix things without me asking, cook on weekends, and sometimes bring home flowers that smelled like the rain. Hira seemed to like him, more than I expected actually. She'd laugh more, talk more. Sometimes I'd see them chatting in the kitchen while I was doing laundry and feel this strange, pure joy, like life had given me a second chance. But happiness, I've learned, has a fragile sound, like thin glass being tapped from underneath. You don't realize how close it is to breaking until it's already cracked. The first crack appeared 6 months ago. It started with small silences. Rizwan began working late more often. Hira stopped joining us for dinner. I told myself it was normal. Teenagers need space, husbands get busy, nothing to worry about. Then one evening, I noticed how quickly Hira hid her phone when I walked into the room. She laughed nervously and said, "Just a meme, Mom." I smiled and nodded. But something in her tone, a mix of guilt and excitement, made me pause. Still, I brushed it off until the night I found the photo. It was supposed to be a normal night. I was ironing Rizwan's shirts while Hira's phone buzzed continuously on the table. She had gone upstairs for a shower, and I thought, like any mother, maybe it's something urgent from school. So I picked it up. The phone wasn't locked. I scrolled through her gallery, looking for a picture from her class event, the one she'd promised to send me. There it was, a folder labeled Us. I smiled, thinking it must be her and her friends. But when I opened it, my smile froze. The first photo was blurry, Hira laughing on the couch, someone's arm around her shoulder. Then the next one, clearer, my husband's arm, Rizwan. I blinked, thinking maybe it was some kind of prank. Maybe I was misunderstanding. But then came the third photo, Hira, her head resting on his chest, eyes closed, his hand brushing her hair away. My heart began to pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. I scrolled faster, one after another, images of them together. On the balcony, in the living room. A selfie, his face too close to hers, his expression unmistakably tender. My whole body felt numb. I remember setting the phone down carefully, like it might explode. My legs wouldn't move. The iron hissed behind me, forgotten. When Hyra came downstairs, humming softly, towel on her shoulder, she looked so normal. My mouth opened, but no words came. She noticed the phone in my hand. Her face changed instantly and the color draining away. "Mom," she whispered, voice shaking. I forced myself to ask, though my throat felt tight. "Who is he, Hyra?" Her eyes darted to the phone, then back to me. Silence stretched between us like a knife. Finally she said it, the words that broke me in half. "It's Rizwan, your husband." For a few seconds after she said it, the world went completely still. No clock ticking, no street noise outside, nothing, just silence. I remember the way the light flickered from the iron in the corner, the faint smell of burnt fabric, and Hira's trembling hands clutching the edge of her towel. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I just whispered, "Say it again." She swallowed hard, eyes glassy, her lips barely moving. "Rizwan," she said again. "It's him." Something inside me folded in on itself. Not anger yet, not even disbelief, just this hollow echo where my heartbeat used to be. I had been betrayed before, yes, by Amir, my first husband. But that was an adult's betrayal, the kind you eventually learn to name, to hate, to outgrow. But this was something else. It was my daughter, my blood. I turned away because looking at her felt unbearable. My hands were shaking so badly I had to hold the chair just to stay upright. "How long?" I asked. She didn't answer. "How long, Hyra?" Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Months. Maybe a year, a whole year. Of me cooking dinner for them, of hearing them laugh from the other room, of believing that maybe I had finally rebuilt our family." I sat down slowly. My knees wouldn't hold me anymore. "Did he force you?" I asked, barely breathing. Her eyes filled with tears. "No, Mom, it wasn't like that." I held up my hand. "Don't. There are moments when a mother stops being a mother for a second. Not because she stops loving her child, but because love gets swallowed up by pain so deep that it can't find its way out." That's what it felt like right then. I didn't say another word. I just stood up and walked out of the room, leaving her there, sobbing. I don't remember how long I sat outside that night, on the porch steps, in my old shawl, staring at nothing. The air was cool and the street lights flickered like my thoughts, in and out, in and out. Rizwan came home around 10. He looked tired, his shirt slightly unbuttoned. He smiled when he saw me. "Did you wait up for me?" he asked, placing his bag on the table. Something about his voice, calm, unbothered, made my stomach twist. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I asked very quietly, "Where were you?" He blinked. "School work. I told you, remember?" I nodded slowly. "You always tell me that." He frowned. "Sarah, what's going on?" I could have thrown the phone in his face right then. I could have screamed and demanded answers. But instead I said the one sentence that froze him completely. "I know about you and Hyra." The color drained from his face. He didn't even try to pretend confusion. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. For a full minute, we just stared at each other. The man I had loved. The man I had trusted with my child. And I watched the guilt climb across his face like a shadow. He finally whispered, "Sarah." "Please, let me explain." I laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. More like a sharp, broken sound that didn't belong to me. "Explain? How do you explain this, Rizwan?" "My daughter." He took a step forward, his hands trembling. "It wasn't what you think. I didn't plan it. It just happened," that phrase. It just happened. I think those are the words that made something inside me die. I stared at him, cold, almost detached. "You mean you didn't stop it?" He ran a hand through his hair, his voice cracking. "She's young, she was lonely, and I didn't mean to hurt you, Sarah." I felt my eyes burn. "You didn't mean to hurt me? You've been living in my house, eating the food I cook. holding my hand, sleeping in my bed, while sneaking around with my daughter. And you think this is something that just happened? He dropped to his knees then, crying, real tears maybe, but I didn't move. I just watched him, a stranger I used to know. Hira came down the stairs, her eyes swollen. Please stop, she cried. Don't fight. That's when I realized I couldn't stay there another second. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and walked out of the house. Rizwan called after me. Hira sobbed, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. I drove without knowing where I was going. The city lights blurred through my tears until I could barely see the road. Finally, I stopped in front of a park, the one where I used to take Hira when she was small. I sat there until the sky began to turn gray. I thought about everything. My first husband's betrayal, the nights I'd spent crying alone, how hard I'd worked to build something better, and now, even that was gone. By morning, I was still sitting in the car, exhausted, hollow. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Red eyes, pale face, a woman I barely recognized. That's when I decided I wasn't going to destroy myself for their sins. Not again. I would go home, but not as the same woman. This time, I would take control. The house was silent when I returned the next morning, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's holding its breath. The curtains were still drawn, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine from the air freshener I used to spray every morning before work. But now the scent made me sick. It reminded me of the woman who believed her life was normal just a day ago. Rizwan was sitting at the dining table, his head in his hands. The half-empty cup of tea beside him had gone cold. Hira's door was shut. I stood at the entrance for a while before finally speaking. I want you both in the living room. He lifted his head slowly, eyes red, face pale, and nodded. A few minutes later, Hira came downstairs, wrapped in a long sweater. She looked even smaller than usual, her hair unbrushed, her expression lost. I waited until they were both seated. Then I took a deep breath and said quietly, "You will both listen. I will not shout. I will not cry. But I deserve the truth, all of it." Neither of them spoke. I looked at Rizwan first. When did it start? He rubbed his temples. Sarah, I don't know how to explain this. It wasn't planned. She was struggling at school. She said you didn't understand her, that you were always tired. I tried to help. Help? I said, my voice steady but cold. By comforting her in bed. He flinched. No, it wasn't like that at first. We talked, that's all. She said I made her feel heard, and I made a mistake. One night she... Stop, I raised a hand. Don't tell me what she did. Tell me what you did. He went silent. The shame on his face told me everything I needed to know. Then I turned to Hira. She wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on her hands, which trembled slightly in her lap. Why, Hira, I asked softly, what did I do that made you do this to me? Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't mean to, Mom, I swear. I was confused. He was always there. You were busy all the time. I thought he cared. Something inside me cracked again, but this time it wasn't anger. It was grief, the kind that digs deep into your soul and whispers that everything you've ever built has turned to dust. I sat back numb. You both destroyed me, I said quietly. You broke something that can never be fixed. Rizwan stood then, tears running down his face. Please, Sarah, let's talk to someone. A counselor, maybe. I looked at him and said the one thing that ended it all. There's no counseling for filth, Rizwan. He froze, and in that moment I think he understood that whatever we had, whatever illusion of love he thought existed, was dead. I stood up, my voice shaking slightly, but firm. You will pack your things and leave this house today. I don't want explanations. I don't want apologies. You'll get a lawyer's notice by the end of the week. He tried to protest, reaching out to touch my arm. I pulled back. Don't ever touch me again. Hira started crying then, loud, uncontrollable sobs that echoed through the room. Mom, please, she begged. Don't hate me. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I looked at her. My little girl who used to sleep on my chest as a baby, whose hair I braided every morning before school. I wanted to hold her, to tell her it would be okay. But I couldn't, not yet. I walked toward the window, staring out at the street where children were laughing on their way to school. Their laughter sounded cruel in that moment, a reminder of innocence lost. I spoke without turning around. I don't hate you, Hira. I hate what you've done. You're still my daughter, but you need to leave too. Go to your aunt's place until I can think clearly. She gasped as if I had slapped her. You're sending me away? Yes, I said quietly. Because if I see either of you for another minute, I might lose whatever humanity I have left. There was nothing else to say. Rizwan gathered his things in silence. Hira packed a small bag. By evening, they were both gone. When the door finally closed behind them, the house felt too big, too quiet. I sat on the floor of my bedroom holding a framed photo of the three of us, smiling at a picnic 2 summers ago. The woman in that picture had no idea what was coming. I didn't cry that night. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because I felt emptied out, like there were no tears left to give. The next few days were a blur. Neighbors asked questions. My sister called 100 times, and my phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. Rizwan's things were gone by the 3rd day. Hira's room stayed locked. Sometimes I'd stand outside it, hand on the doorknob, wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. One evening I opened it. The faint smell of her perfume still lingered. The photos on the wall, the stuffed bear on the bed, the textbooks half open on her desk. All of it froze me in time. Then I saw something taped to her mirror, a small piece of paper with shaky handwriting. I'm sorry, Mom. I know you'll never forgive me. But I hope one day you'll remember I was still your daughter. I sank to the floor and finally cried. Not for them, but for the years I lost, for the trust I gave so freely, for the part of me that would never return. That night, I made myself a promise. I would not let this betrayal define me. I had already survived once. I could survive again. Tomorrow I'd call my lawyer. But tonight, I just needed to breathe. The morning after they left, I woke up before dawn. For a moment, my body followed its old rhythm, reaching for the other side of the bed, expecting warmth. But all I found was the cold imprint of absence. I sat there for a long while, listening to the ticking of the clock. The same sound that once filled our home with comfort now mocked me. Every tick was a reminder that time was moving forward, whether I was ready or not. The first thing I did that morning was strip the bed. The sheets still smelled faintly of him, that citrus aftershave he loved. I threw everything into the washing machine and stood there watching the water swirl, like it might wash away the memories too. By mid-morning, my sister, Naila, showed up unannounced. She took one look at me and said, "You haven't eaten, have you?" I didn't answer. She didn't press. She just started cooking, eggs, toast, and tea. The smell of butter hit the air, and for a moment it felt like life was trying to find its way back into the house. When we finally sat down, I told her everything, every painful detail. She didn't interrupt. She just held my hand the whole time. When I finished, she whispered, "Sarah, this isn't your fault." I looked up at her and said softly, "Then why do I feel like it is?" "Because you loved them," she said. "And people like you always blame themselves when love is betrayed." Those words stayed with me. Over the next week, I began to piece my life together in fragments. I went back to work at the clinic. I smiled at patients even when my chest ached. I started eating again, small meals, mostly soup and rice. And every night, I journaled. Not about the betrayal itself, but about the silence that followed it. The way the house creaked at night. The way the sunlight fell on the empty dining table. But then, one afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note from Hira. "Mom, please don't hate me. I'm staying with Dad's sister for now. Rizwan came to see me, but I told him not to. I made a mistake, a terrible one, and I'll carry it forever. Please don't cut me off completely. I'll wait for the day you'll let me come home." My hands trembled as I read it. I could almost hear her voice in those words, young, broken, and scared. For a long time, I didn't know how to feel. Anger was easier, but grief was louder. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my journal. I wasn't ready to respond, not yet. A few days later, Rizwan tried to contact me. He sent a message. I've moved out. I'll sign whatever you need. I know I've lost you, but please don't turn Hira against me. She's a child who made a mistake. I stared at the message for a while before deleting it. No reply, no closure, just silence. One evening, I attended a women's group at the local community center. Something Naila insisted I try. We sat in a circle, women of all ages sharing pieces of their lives, losses, betrayals, recoveries. When it was my turn, I hesitated. Then I said quietly, "My name is Sarah, and I recently lost the two people I loved most, not to death, but to deceit." The room was silent for a moment. Then one woman said softly, "Sometimes the ones who betray us are the very ones we taught how to love." That sentence cracked something open in me, because it was true. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. The ache was still there, it always would be, but it no longer controlled me. I realized something powerful. I could survive this without revenge. The greatest revenge would be peace, the kind that didn't need witnesses or explanations. The next morning, I made a decision. I would sell the house. Every wall, every corner held ghosts of the life I'd built with them. I needed a new start, not to erase the past, but to stop living inside it. When I met the real estate agent, she asked if I was sure. I smiled faintly. Completely. As I packed my things, I found old photos, birthdays, vacatio, family dinners. I kept only a few. One of Hira as a child holding her first painting, another of my parents on their anniversary. The rest I put in a box and sealed it shut. Moving day was quiet. I stood at the doorway one last time, hand resting on the frame. This house had been my dream, but some dreams turn into cages. And I was done living in mine. My new apartment was small with light blue curtains and a balcony overlooking a park. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The first night there, I made tea, sat by the window, and finally exhaled. No shouting, no secrets, no lie. You iced the sound of distant laughter from the park below. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about forgiveness. Not for them, but for me. I knew that someday, maybe not soon, I'd let Hera back into my life. But it would be on new terms, ones built on honesty and boundaries. As for Rizwan, he would become a closed chapter. A name that once mattered, now reduced to a lesson. And that lesson was simple. Trust is sacred. Once broken, it changes everything. But it also shows you who you really are when the world falls apart. 6 months had passed since that day. The day my world shifted in ways I still struggle to describe. 6 months since the letter, the messages, the tears. 6 months since I decided to start over. The apartment felt alive now. The air no longer smelled like memories. It smelled like me. Jasmine candles on the shelf. My favorite books stacked in a corner. A small plant growing by the window. Life had become quieter, simpler, and yet I'd never felt stronger. I began volunteering at the same community center where I'd once sat broken and speechless. Now I was the one listening to others. Women who'd been cheated, mothers who'd been lied to, wives who'd been forgotten. I didn't offer advice. I offered presence. Sometimes all someone needs is to be heard, without judgment, without interruption. It became my purpose. One evening, after a long session, I was locking up when I saw a familiar figure outside the gate. Hira. She looked thinner, older, and nervous, like a child caught between hope and fear. In her hands, she held a small bouquet of white lilies. "Mom," she said softly. I froze. For a moment, my heart forgot how to beat. She took a small step forward. "I know I don't deserve to be here, but I couldn't go another day without seeing you." The streetlight flickered above us. I didn't say anything, just looked at her, taking in every detail. Her voice trembled as she continued, "I made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought I was grown up, that I knew what love meant, but I destroyed the two people who loved me most. I can't undo it, but I'm ready to live with what I did, if you'll just let me see you once in a while." A tear rolled down her cheek. I stepped closer. For the first time, I noticed how tired she looked, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much guilt. Without thinking, I reached out and touched her face. She gasped, then burst into tears, falling into my arms like a child again. We stood there for what felt like forever. Mother and daughter, both broken, both trying to find pieces of home inside each other again. Later, over tea in my small kitchen, we talked. Not like before, not with laughter or lightness, but with honesty. She told me everything. How it started, how he manipulated her emotions, made her feel seen and loved in ways she'd never understood before. How she mistook attention for affection and rebellion for freedom. I listened silently. Every word cut deep, but I didn't stop her, because healing doesn't come from silence, it comes from truth. When she finished, I said quietly, "Hira, I can't erase what happened, and I can't promise things will go back to how they were, but I'm willing to start, slowly." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. That's all I could ever ask for. As she left that night, she hesitated at the door and said, "I heard he's leaving the city. He wanted to talk to you before he goes." I smiled faintly. "He's already said everything I needed to hear," in his silence. She didn't argue. She just hugged me one more time, then disappeared into the night. A week later, I received divorce papers in the mail, already signed by him. No note, no apology. Just his name at the bottom, in familiar handwriting that once meant love. I signed my part without hesitation. Then I took the papers, folded them neatly, and placed them in an envelope labeled "The Past." It wasn't bitterness, it was closure. Months passed. Hira began visiting occasionally, helping me cook, sharing small stories about her new job, her therapy sessions, her attempts to rebuild her life. Our bond was fragile but real. One evening, while we sat on the balcony sipping tea, she said quietly, "Mom, do you think you'll ever forgive him?" I looked out at the fading sky and said, "Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing ourselves from the chains they left behind. And yes, I forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace." She smiled, and I could see relief in her eyes. Maybe for both of us. The story didn't end with fireworks or grand gestures. There was no confrontation, no public apology. Just a woman who had lost everything and learned that what remains after destruction can still be beautiful. My heart still ached sometimes, especially on quiet nights when memories whispered. But now, I'd learned how to answer them. I survived. Months later, as spring arrived, the jasmine on my balcony bloomed for the first time. I sat with a cup of tea, watching the petals dance in the soft wind, and thought about how strange life is, how something must break before something new can grow. I opened my journal, turned to the last page, and wrote, "Pain changes people, but healing rebuilds them quietly." Then I closed the book, and this time I didn't cry. When I asked, "When's the wedding?" and she said, "We got married yesterday," I thought my world had ended. But sometimes endings are just beginnings, disguised as heartbreak.